I'm Godfrey Parkin, and welcome to another edition of Growth Hackers, the show where we talk about how you can use digital to grow your business. I've been asked by a couple of people that I should talk a little bit more about what growth hacking really is, where it came from, why it's different from digital marketing, and why digital marketing is different from traditional marketing. So the idea is really to go right the way back and try and build up a profile of what is so special about growth hacking, where does it come from, and why does it give you so much power as a business person today. The first thing to do, I think, is to really think a little bit about the history of where marketing actually came from, because if you look at that, you'll see how remarkably different things are today. Marketing as a concept started back in the 1950s and 1960s. A guy called Philip Kotler decided to start codifying this concept of marketing. Up until then, marketing was all about getting your product to a market. If you were a manufacturer, you went to a market to sell your product. If you were a buyer, you went to a market to get your product. Manufacturers had all of the control. People would buy whatever was made for them because there wasn't a great deal of choice, either in who they bought from or where they bought it. Kotler said, wait a second, why don't we take a look at things rather from a manufacturer's perspective, but from a consumer's perspective? And the whole idea behind marketing was to turn that relationship on its head. So marketing is really all about trying to understand your customer, what their needs are, what their aspirations are, and what their problems are, and then producing a solution to those problems or an answer to those needs, rather than saying, I can build this, let me sell it to you. That in itself is a really simple concept, but it actually produces a whole bunch of questions, because it says, just because I can manufacture radial tires doesn't necessarily mean that the customer wants radial tires. It asks the question, what are the needs of a customer? And do customers know what those needs actually are? So the discipline of marketing started digging into consumer behavior, the psychology of decision making, taking a look at everything from demographics, the ability to pay, the ability to spend, lifestyle issues, where people were going in life, and tried to break down and codify how people see themselves in the world that they operate in. It turned into a relatively sophisticated field. You probably are aware of, in those days, and certainly still today, we used to talk about the 4 Ps of marketing. We used to talk about the fundamental pillars on which you could connect with the consumer. The first one, of course, was product. The product or service that you produced had to match to a need or a desire or a want. The second was price. There's no point in having a product that people want if they can't afford it. The third one, of course, is place. There's no point in having a product that people can afford and want to buy, but can't get because it's not available where they are. And the last one is packaging, which is all about trying to make your product unique, stand out, look and feel different. Packaging is not necessarily just about the box that you put the product into. It's really all about design. The way you style a car, for example, is packaging. The way you decorate a restaurant is packaging. It's all about the visual perception that people get of your product, and ideally you want to make that as unique as possible and as appealing as possible to your particular target market. So those factors all started to turn into a major science. And over time, the one thing that really started to work for people was another P, promotion. Promotion is all about how do you actually get people to know that you've got a product that they want and can afford and looks great to them. And promotion came in lots of different flavors. Initially, it was all about printing stuff in magazines and newspapers. And then along came television. And television completely upset the power balance between the buyer and the seller, because television is an incredibly powerful, persuasive medium. And with television advertising, manufacturers could actually start to manipulate the way people felt about their needs and their wants. And as time went by, you started to get people being manipulated into wanting products that they didn't need or want. And you started to get the balance of power in that buyer-seller relationship falling very, very firmly into the manufacturer's camp. What happens when that transpires, of course, is that you end up with more and more big companies pushing more and more product to people who just accept it because there's nothing else. And once again, you get back to that market phenomenon where the amount of suppliers you can choose from is not great. Within that, your marketers became really sophisticated, and so they started to multiply the number of offerings they had inside of their brands. Classic example is if you go into any supermarket and you look at the shampoo shelf, there are dozens and dozens of brands of shampoo, and within each brand there are dozens of different variants. You can get a shampoo for artificially colored hair, for fragile hair, for dry hair, for flaky hair, for oily hair. It's hard to actually find a shampoo for ordinary hair that just needs cleaning. But that explosion of variety from a very small number of suppliers is in itself also a little bit manipulative. The consumer has to pick something and they have to buy whatever is available. And I guess during the heady days of the 1980s, this became a bit of an issue with people because more and more dissatisfaction was felt by people about being pushed around by big brands and big companies. And then everything changed. In the 1990s, 1993 to be specific, the web came along. And the web empowered the individual to talk. The web gave people a voice. It wasn't through Facebook, because Facebook was not even a gleam in Mark Zuckerberg's eye at the time. But it was through blogging and through online forums and through online discussion groups. And what happened was individuals started to express their dissatisfaction or express their wishes in a way that they had never had before. So suddenly, the voice of the consumer was being heard all the way back up that supply chain. And that really upset a lot of manufacturers because they felt threatened by it. A lot of manufacturers felt empowered by it because getting to know your customer again was a new thing for them. So the web introduced this amazing new dynamic into the marketplace, and it was a digital dynamic. The digital dynamic really empowered the individual to have a voice in the solutions that were being suggested to him. But it was more than that. Once you started getting into social media, you had a collective voice. It wasn't just an individual being able to connect with a manufacturer, it was a group of individuals and then a larger group of individuals. And this amazing echo effect that happens with social media suddenly became something that was like a megaphone screaming back at customers, screaming back from customers. That upset your manufacturers even more. And I can't tell you the number of CEOs or marketing directors that I spoke to over the last 10, 15 years who said social media is the worst thing that has ever happened to us because all people do is complain. And it's true. It gave people a voice. But the enlightened marketers were delighted by it because it allowed them to connect with their customers and to hear what their customers were actually thinking. But it did something even more fundamental than that. What it did was it gave your consumers a platform for changing the power dynamic. It took away the ability of your manufacturer to control the conversation and to control the message. So after the late 1990s and into the early part of this century, we were in a situation where a brand is not what a manufacturer says it is. A brand is what the consumers say it is. What people say about you is who you are. And that, again, is kind of alarming to big business because big business is so accustomed to being in control of everything and every aspect of what they're doing. So we're getting a big shake-up taking place at the moment. We're seeing agencies trying to launch and make money out of digital agencies. We're seeing brands launching their own social platforms, trying to get into conversations with customers, trying to make sense out of this whole thing and trying to turn this information flow that is now going in two directions into a positive thing for their business rather than a negative thing. It's a lot more complicated than it used to be. Because if you think about those P's, place is something that has changed dramatically. Yes, you physically got to go somewhere to buy a product if it's a service like a hairdressing salon or a restaurant, but you can also acquire your products and services online. Place is everywhere. But place, for a lot of people, is on their computer or on their phone. They don't care where you are geographically anymore. Price has become a lot more transparent. You can search around and find out what other people are charging for the same product. You can search around and find out where cheaper versions of a similar product are available, or without getting up off your chair, just by doing it on your phone. promotion has become really, really complicated, because in the old days it was about buying the right space on magazines and radio and newspapers and putting some ads on TV. Now you've got the capability of putting your message out everywhere on the internet. You can put out banner ads wherever people are on the internet to see your banner ads, which are your advertisements that people can click on to come to your website. And you can use social media as a platform for communicating the values of your product. So people can now, as manufacturers, can now talk to customers and start promoting things inside a Facebook page, for example, or on a Twitter feed. They've got the capability of putting all that leverage that you used to have in television into streaming video on your social media platforms. So a lot has actually changed, and this whole thing has become a great deal more complex. From a marketing point of view, digital is fundamentally different from the good old days when everything was stable and simple and fairly predictable. From a consumer's point of view, it's also become a little bit awkward, because we're starting to be bombarded by more and more messages and seeing more and more brands and more endorsements of products. But we're able to filter it. We've got this amazing capacity in our brains to filter out stuff that isn't interesting to us without even knowing that we're doing it. So, for example, if you're reading a newspaper or a magazine online on your phone, and there is a banner advertisement on the right-hand side of that page, you don't even see it. You're not even aware that it's there, because your brain has triggered a filter which says, I don't want to see it, it doesn't exist anymore. Of course, you can get software filters that do that for you as well. So consumers, again, have got the power over what messages do I receive, and what messages do I pay attention to, and what messages do I engage with. Digital marketing is really all about how do you cut through that clutter? How do you actually connect with people when they're in the digital space? Because people spend a great deal of time in the digital space. On average, in developing countries, people are spending about 3 hours a day in social platforms. That's more than they're spending on television in many instances. So you need to be where they are if you want to be able to connect with them and communicate with them. And you've got to figure out, where are they? What is going to interest them and not get them to filter me out? And how am I actually going to actively engage with them? It's become more of an intellectual exercise than it ever was before, and it's no longer about the hard sell and about promotional messaging. Where does growth hacking fit into this whole thing? Well, growth hacking is an evolution of digital marketing. Perhaps it's not an evolution, it's actually a subset of digital marketing. Growth hacking came out of the startup game, where you have small businesses with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, all trying to get their product to just go big overnight. How do you do that if you don't have a budget, you don't have the resources to hire a major advertising agency, and you don't have really much clue in the way of traditional marketing anyway, you don't have an established brand? What do you do? So growth hacking is a term that was coined by these people and has become a term of art in marketing. And essentially what you do with growth hacking is you focus on the stuff that you can afford to do. You experiment manically. You test, you evaluate, you change, you test again, you evaluate, and you change. You can do that digitally. You can't do that in traditional marketing. Let me give you an example. If you want to run an advertisement that goes to married women between the ages of 30 and 40 within 5 kilometers of where your business is based, who have an interest in fashion, you can target them on Facebook. So you can go into Facebook, you can say, create an advertisement, this is who my target market actually is, drop a pin on a map, draw a circle around it, and those are the people, the only people who will see your advertisement. You don't waste money advertising to people who won't be interested or can't possibly be a customer. And then you create your advertising campaign. But unlike traditional advertising, where there's a long process involved in developing the campaign, putting it together, shooting it, creating it, and then buying media time and then running it over a period of weeks or months, in digital, you can do it today. So you can create your ad today on your phone or on your laptop, and you can launch it immediately. And the people that you're targeting will have the ability to see it and react to it immediately. And depending on the size of your budget, you can get tens of thousands of people seeing your ad today. That gives you the opportunity to do what is called A/B testing. Now, A/B testing is really all about testing version A of your advertisement against version B of your advertisement. You flight both of these ads out there and you see which one is giving you the best results. And you can test it down to a microscopic level of detail. So you can say, I'm going to have a pink tinged image in this ad and a blue tinged image in that ad, and everything else remains the same. And if you get a 50% greater flow through from your pink tinged ad, then that's the one that you go with. And then you take that ad and you experiment with the headline, or the call to action, or the button which says buy now or find out more. And by testing repeatedly over a period of days, possibly even weeks, but that's not necessary, you end up refining an advertisement that gives you the maximum, as they say, bang for your buck. You get the maximum return on what you're doing because you've paid a lot of attention to the detail that you're putting into it. And that attention to detail allows you to optimize the way you go about marketing. You can then start testing just about everything. And that's what real growth hackers do. They test the pages that you land on the website. They test the language that's on the website. They test the imagery, the calls to action. They test the forms that you're asking people to fill in. They will test the way they target the ad. They will test one budget against another budget. They'll test one time of day against another time of day. And I used the word earlier, manic, because that's essentially what it looks like. But in reality, it's very, very controlled, but it's very rapid, and it's very obsessive. And at the end of a week or 2 weeks of growth hack testing, you can end up getting 5, 10, 20 times the impact for your budget that you had when you first began. So growth hacking is an evolution of marketing. It's a way to get in and fine-tune what you're doing, and it's an absolutely perfect thing for people to do if they don't have much of a budget and they can't afford waste. Big brands waste all the time. They do a lot of shotgunning. They'll go, let's just blast this out to women and hope for the best nationwide. If you're a big brand and you're watching this, I don't really mean that, because I know how much work actually goes into the background. But you tend to work with much more blunt instruments than somebody that's really trying to get by with $100 worth of budget. You've got to be really, really careful with every cent or every penny that you're spending. So growth hacking comes out of marketing. Marketing comes out of the old manufacturing regime. And what growth hacking does to the manufacturer or to the supplier, whoever it is it puts them back in touch with the customer, because in the process of experimenting, you start to discover what really turns your customer on. You start to discover the things that work with your customer. You don't necessarily discover why they work. In classical marketing, it's really important for you to answer the question why. That's what classical market research is all about. In market research, you go out of your way to try and understand consumer behavior so that you can model it and you can say, well, so next time if we do this, the outcome is likely to be that. In growth hacking, you really don't care. You don't need to know why it works. You just need to know that it works. And that saves you a huge amount of time and money in your budget as well. So how would you go about, in a relatively simple way, if you were a small business and you wanted to market your small business that you've never marketed before digitally? I'm going to give you the 5-minute version, and in future episodes we're going to be digging down into each one of these things in a great deal more detail. The first one is to go back to those old principles of marketing and say, let's look at product, let's look at price, let's look at packaging, and let's look at place. How can we leverage those things to get our local market to come to us? So if we assume that you're a local business that is physically based, you don't have You're not selling digital downloads of music, for example, or you're not selling tickets online. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get people to come to your premises. Say you're a tax consultant, or a dentist, or a panel beater, or any business that is locally grounded and actually unable to ship its product out. Personal services businesses, for example. You look at your place and you identify how far away do people come when they come to my type of business. And in most instances, that's probably no more than 10 kilometers, maybe 20 at the most. And that gives you a circle, a catchment area that you can start to target. But place in digital is more than just the physical location. Because when people click on your advertisement or click on a link, they don't come to you physically. We haven't yet managed to master the teleportation thing. I believe that's scheduled for the iPhone 20. But right now what you do is you teleport them to your website, or you teleport them to a Facebook page, or you teleport them to a blog, or you teleport them to a YouTube video. Every piece of information about you on the internet has an address. It's a virtual address, it's not a physical address. But if you have a video about your business, say you're a restaurant, you have a video about your restaurant which you're hosting for free on YouTube, that video has a URL, a unique address on the web, and you can send people directly to that video if they click on your ad. If you've got a Facebook page, you can send people directly to your Facebook page. If you've invested in building a website, you can send people to your website. If you've got a blog, you can push them there. If you're in the business-to-business mode, you can send them to your profile on LinkedIn, for example. There are lots of places that you can send people to, and when they're on those places, they can start to find out more about you, and you can start to convert them from being a visitor into being a customer. So that's place. Price, you can start to research competitive prices. You can see what other people are charging for similar services, what prices actually matter. Because the web is a really transparent place, a lot of people think that they shouldn't be putting prices out there. They shouldn't be telling people what it costs. In reality, you'll find that the more transparent you are about what people are going to be spending if they come and do business with you, the more likely you are to get people coming to do business with you. People don't like the idea that you are hiding something from them when they're on the web, particularly if other people are very transparent about what their charges, what their fees, what their rates are. If you're a restaurant and you're putting your menu up there, put the prices on so people can see what they're in for when they come in to spend an evening with you. Think about your product. Your product is not the physical manifestation of your product, and I've talked about this many times in the past. Your product is the experience that people have when they consume it. That's the difference between a modern brand and a 19th century product. Okay? People don't consume your product because it's a great product. They consume your product because of how it makes them feel. So think about how people will feel when they do business with you. If you're repairing cars, will they walk away confident and happy and delighted that you've been friendly and are trustworthy? If you're a restaurant, will they have a great time? Will they have enjoyed the food? The emotional overlays of your product should never, ever be pushed beneath the technical features of your product. Because once you do that, people go, well, that sounds boring. What's the price? Oh, that sounds expensive. I don't want to do it. But the more emotional you can make your product appear in the way that you actually describe it, the better. And the best way to do that is with video, which is everybody has a video camera on their phone, and you can shoot perfectly good quality video that is capable of being posted in social platforms from your phone. Don't worry about the detail of that. And the last element there is packaging. So packaging is how do you wrap your product or your service in such a way that it is really remarkably appealing and appears to be different. Now, part of that is branding. You might decide that you need a logo, which is very different from anybody else. But a lot of the way you package your product is the language that you wrap it in when you talk about it. And again, emotion is really important. Illustration is very important. Video is really important, because a restaurant is not a place where you go to sit down and eat food. A restaurant is a place where you go to have an entertaining evening with your friends or your family. That's what it is. It's not about the ingredients in the recipe. That's what they're paying for, but actually what they're paying for is a great night out with the family. So we've gone a long way from traditional marketing all the way through to digital marketing, all the way through to growth hacking. It's been a sort of helicopter view, or I should say drone overview of where we are right now, and we'll dip down into some of those details as to how you can actually leverage them, how you can run A/B tests, and so on as we move forward in the program. But for now, I need to say goodbye because we've come to the end of the show. Thank you for spending your time with us. Next time, we're going to be moving on to something a little bit more specific, and I want to talk particularly about video and YouTube and how you can go about using that to grow your business. Thank you very much.